shorter. I usually have to slow down. Good morning.
Good morning.
The reading this morning is from the 30th chapter of Deuteronomy from the New Living Translation. Today I have given you the choice between life and death, between blessings and curses. Now I call on heaven and earth to witness the choice you make. Oh, that you would choose life, so that you and your descendants might live. You can make this choice by loving the Lord your God, obeying him, and committing yourself firmly to him. This is your key to life. And if you love and obey the Lord, you will live long in the land the Lord swore to give your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Word of God, word of life.
Thanks be to God. Ancient words ever true, changing me and changing you. We have come with open hearts, so let the ancient words impart.
The Lord be with you. Also with you. Well, I need to tell you that this sermon series is a reminder that as a pastor, I need to be careful what I ask for. Because several months ago, I stood up here on a whim and said, you know what would be fun? A sermon series on all y'all's favorite questions. And in that pile up there was a lovely question from somebody sitting in a pew today. He signed his name to it, so I feel like I can out Josh. So this is all Josh's fault, by the way. You're going to hear it. I'm sorry. Right? Josh wrote, it would be interesting to hear a sermon series on those Christian cliches. You know, like those things that you see on cute signs or cross-stitched on pillows or printed on t-shirts, right? Things like, it's all part of God's plan. Or, when God closes a door, he opens a window. Or, too blessed to be stressed. Right? Or any of these things that you may have heard. Things often declared or proclaimed when we're in times of struggle or challenge. And I read the question and I thought, hey, that sounds kind of like fun. I've always kind of wanted to do that because often these things are annoying to me. So I went to PB. He said, okay. I'm not sure he knew it. He was agreeing to either. and away we went. When I started this series, I was going to use Kate Bowler's Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved. It's a great narrative and exploration of these things. So if you want a good narrative autobiography story, I highly recommend this book. But it did not lend itself to the easy forming of a sermon series. So somebody pointed me towards half-truths. God helps those who help themselves and other things the Bible doesn't say, by Adam Hamilton. And I thought, great. It's a whole book, 6 weeks, exactly what we needed. This will make it easier. There is nothing easy about a sermon series on Christian cliches and half-truths because they are so ingrained into our culture and particularly to our Christian language that we often don't even realize we are using them. Not to mention, the reason we use cliches is often because we want life to be very clear-cut. And these cliches give us easy, concrete-ish answers in hard times. And when we try to disentangle them from our faith life, it gets tricky. Language gets tricky as we move from what Hamilton calls these faith half-truths into what he calls the full truths. You know, the not so easy answers, the more nuanced understanding, that place where often language starts to fail. So let me tell you, language starts to fail in the sermon a little bit today. And let me also start with a word of warning, a word of wisdom, and ask, or whatever you want to call it. Because here's the thing about Christian cliches, is starting to examine them often butts up against our beliefs that we hold, even if we don't realize it is doing that or that it might. Even if we don't think that this is a belief we hold on to, it may be there at a deeper level. It may challenge a belief that you have held on to in hard times. It may bring up memories of past struggles. It may just leave you uneasy and with questions. And if this is the case, I want you to remember that the beauty of church is that you are not in this journey alone. So when you have the questions or the feelings that you don't know what to do with, you have Pastor Brad and myself, or you have a life group. It's part of why we paired this series with a life group, because this sermon series lends itself to that exploration and conversation. And today we get to begin with what I think is one of the most prevalent half-truths that we have. Everything happens for a reason. And when we use it in church circles, we are often implying that that reason is God. In non-faith circles, this can sound something like, while you're sick, did you eat all your vegetables as a child? Or, what did he do to cause this to happen? Or, maybe you should try insert latest cultural fad for healing here, with the implication that these things are happening for a reason. In Christian circles, it sounds like it's all part of God's plan. Or when God closes a door, he opens a window. Or some version of God is trying to teach me a lesson that I just can't seem to learn. And let me tell you, this is not a God that I believe in. A God who causes bad things to happen to teach us a lesson. Or a God who causes pain in order to make us stronger. Or a God who bad things happen because God needed another angel. So I'm going to start today with a truth that I learned in one of my first communication studies classes in college. Correlation does not equal causation. If you've taken any sort of statistics class or communications class or anything, you will have heard this. Correlation does not equal causation. I missed a slide here, so there's a slide for this is best illustrated in a book that used to be at my parents' house called Spurious Correlations, which is packed full of things that appear to be related when you map them over each other, but are not. Things like the number of donuts eaten and the number of high school diplomas given. Or the number of letters in the winning word for the Scripps National Spelling Bee and the number of people killed by venomous spiders. Or the number of the number of movies Nicolas Cage appeared in and the number of transportation security screeners in North Dakota. I want to know who has enough time to figure these things out. Because the other fun fact is, according to this book at least, Nicolas Cage causes a lot of things. There are a lot of things that correlate with Nicolas Cage movies, including death by falling into a swimming pool. So our world might just be a better place if Nicolas Cage stopped appearing in movies. Right? All of these things appear to be correlated, but they are not caused by one another. The number of letters in a spelling word does not cause venomous spider bites. And the same can be true of our faith. We can learn new lessons through struggles. God doesn't cause the struggles to teach us a lesson. We can become stronger through a painful situation. God does not cause painful situations as a spiritual weightlifting session in our lives. We believe in an eternal feast of saints gathered at Christ's table. We believe in angels and the chorus of angels. And it doesn't mean God causes death to collect another angel. Just because God uses it does not mean God causes it. Let me say that again. Just because God uses it does not mean God causes it. God is active and present in our world and uses what is here, but it doesn't mean God causes it. Let's take a moment to turn to those scriptures that we have no doubt heard to prove that God has a plan for us, right? Things like Jeremiah 1:5, I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. Or Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, plans for good and not disaster. Isaiah 42, who the Lord of heaven's armies has spoken, who can change his plans? Or in the story of Joseph when he has been reunited with his brothers and is talking to them and says, "You intended me harm, but God intended it for good." My hunch is if you've been in the faith circle long enough, you have heard one of these verses referred to when talking about hard times and how it's part of God's plan, or how bad things that people do, God uses them for good, and that was in the intention. Folks will point to these verses as a way of saying whatever happens is a part of God's plan. Whatever hard or bad thing happened is a part of your life and God's plan. Whatever bad thing somebody did is a part of God's plan. And we often forget that these words were generally spoken, no, not generally, these words were spoken in a larger context to a specific people in a specific time and are part of a story, not words to be pulled for our own proof texting. And these words and the use of these verses in this way can lead to an image as God as a micromanager or a puppet master, right? The one who is pulling every string to make things happen. The churchy word for this is sovereign. We believe God is sovereign, causes all things to happen, pulling the strings, in control of everything. And when faced with a vision of this understanding of God, people in a pain-free world, in a pain-filled world, faced with an understanding of God causing pain, can also turn then to God as watchmaker. We swing to the other side, where God sets the whole thing in motion, but never interacts with creation again, that God is totally hands off. Basically, free will. God gives us a choice, we make the choice, bad things happen, it's our fault. But my understanding and my experience of God point me to a more in-between knowing of who God is. Of a God who is sovereign, but doesn't necessarily micromanage our lives, but also isn't hands off. Or a God who gives us free will, but also continues to be active and move in the world. Of a God who wants and plans and hopes the best for us. But a reminder that we live not in God's world, but the human world where sin is still a reality. And this is what we hear in the Bible reading today, right? We get two verses of a larger story, so let's remember that larger story. The larger story is we are in Deuteronomy. We are nearing the end of the Exodus journey for the Israelites. They are on the verge of walking into the promised land, and Moses knows he won't be going with them. And in order to prepare them for the life they will have in this promised land, Moses gives this farewell speech, right? He says to them, here are all the laws, the lessons, the things that happened along this 40-year journey. This is a reminder of who you are and what God freed you for. And these two verses today, this invitation to choose life and blessings, is a reminder that while God has given the Israelites laws and rules, they will have to choose to follow them. That God has a plan for them, and the Israelites are invited into being a part of it. And here's our reminder as well. If you've heard any of our sermon series about David, or any sermon series we've ever preached on just about any part of the exile, you will know that the Israelites don't live long in perfection. They very quickly fall short of God's best hopes and dreams for them. They very quickly choose what everybody else has over the messy relationship with God. And God continues to work through the Israelites. It doesn't matter that they have fallen short. It doesn't matter that they have made the choice that God would not have made for them. God continues to work through them. The invitation here to choosing life is not about choosing a perfect, easy, pain-free life. It is about choosing to put our trust in God's presence through all that comes. It's about choosing to trust that while God does not cause the hard things in our life, God works through the hard things in our life. It's about remembering that while God doesn't cause things to happen, God works through those things and works through the people in our life. It's a reminder that while God's hand plays a part in what is happening in our world, we are humans with free will, and we get to make our choices too. And above that, above all things, it's a reminder that no matter what our choices are, No matter how often we stumble and fall, God has named us and claimed us and loves us. That God's best hope for us and the world is a world full of abundant life and love and grace. And yet free will is a thing that means it's not always our reality. These verses are not an invitation to make a one-time choice and then have a happy, perfect life forever, but an over and over and over again invitation that we get to choose a messy relationship with a God who has first chosen us. Right? A reminder that we have been given the gift of free will and we have been given the God who leads us in a way. It's a reminder that even when we fall short, even when we mess up, even when our choices don't lead towards perfection, God is still present and active and working in our lives. The full truth in this half-truth is that maybe everything does happen for a reason. And sometimes that reason is our choice. Sometimes that reason is another person's choice. Sometimes that reason is that we live in a broken and sinful world. But what I know for sure is that God is never the reason for pain and suffering. God is never the reason for hurt. God will work through it. God is present through it, but God does not cause it. The full truth is that God is sovereign, in control, and moving. God gives us the freedom of free will and choice so that we can make our own decisions, and God continues to work through people. Imperfect, messy, often falling short people. Everything may happen for a reason, but God is not the reason. God is the way we get through it. God is the reminder that we are not alone. God is the reminder and the strength that we are created and loved and called by name. Remember that. We get to choose life, choose messy relationship, choose hard struggles with God, not for perfection, but for a promise that God is present. And all of God's people said, I invite you to stand and join us in singing our hymn of the day.
All this pain, I wonder if I'll ever find my way. I wonder if my life could really change at all.
On this earth, could all that is lost ever be found? Could a garden come up from this ground at all?
You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of the dust. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of us. All around, hope is springing up from this old ground. Out of chaos, life is being found in you. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of the dust. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of us. things. You make beautiful things out of the dust. You make beautiful things. You make